View from the Gutters, episode 134. Welcome to View from the Gutters, the comic book podcast where each episode we discuss a collected edition, trade paperback, or graphic novel, and then recommend and vote on the book for the next episode. Warning: the discussion portion of this show has massive spoilers for that book. On this episode, we discuss Hip Hop Family Tree, and to skip ahead to the recommendation section, skip to 118.02. Alright, View from the Gutters episode. Joe, are you going to talk through my intro?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Trying to remember it's like you were so quiet for like 10 minutes, and I was like ready to go. And the minute I started talking, how did that even happen?
It's like the thought, and I'm just like
literally, how did that even happen?
I just got
not just talking, but jingling keys.
He was just like jingling keys and like murmuring to himself like a crazy.
My crew supervisor that did night. The reason I'm working 410s is because one of my employees recently left, and he just gave me a shit ton of keys.
I don't need to know this. I know that you really want to tell me. This is irrelevant information to me.
It's on the record.
Oh my god.
Oh god, I am literally
Everyone
crying.
go home.
Can I fucking go home, please?
Yes, you
Forever?
may. You've been dismissed.
Oh my god.
You're an adult, Joe. Do whatever you want.
How many people are watching?
Probably just one.
Just one.
Okay, that's fine.
It's all about the aftermarket, Kenny.
I agree.
Oh my god. All right.
That's when Chard just adds random duck effects and we just throw it out.
Yeah.
I gotta add some
He
quacks.
puts ducks over all of us. It's really...
It's pretty good. View from the Gutters, episode 134. I mean, geez, I'm done with all of you.
I'm sorry.
Time to go home.
Sorry.
I was not rattling my keys.
Yes, you were. I recorded it.
I'm sorry.
God.
Welcome to View from the Gutters.
Hit it, Chard.
God.
Episode 134. I'm Tobiah Panshin.
I'm Andrew Chard.
I'm Kenny Wisdom.
Why would you do?
was
You're in
all
the middle of
screwed
a
up.
circle.
Oh my god. Nobody fucking cares who I am.
He's used to skipping the ginger.
I'm used to... Yeah.
Are we starting over?
No.
No.
I'm Kayleigh Fleeman.
Everybody knows who I am.
That was like fucking 4 attempts at the intro.
Jesus Christ.
So if
That was
you
a hell of a
We're
night.
professionals.
If you join our live stream by donating to our Patreon, you too could hear us redo the intro 4 times.
Fucking times.
Because Joe has shit to say about his goddamn keys.
Once I jingled my keys too, I'll come clean.
But yes, hello everyone. We have some episode announcements, including our sponsors.
Yes. Thank you to our episode sponsors, Brandon Hill, Brian May, Addison Appleby, and Becca Lewandowski.
Yay!
Thank you, guys.
We've got a new one.
Yes, we have a new
Yeah,
sponsor
you-
as of last week.
Yeah,
You weren't here.
yeah,
I was not here.
Thanks, Becca.
yes.
Yeah.
And thank you to everyone who listens
Yes.
and supports us on Patreon.
And coaches the show.
And thank you
Yes.
to our podcast coach, Kenny. When did we hire you?
I don't think
well,
we did.
Don't worry about details such as that.
I mean,
I've
Just
been
know the
paying
show
him under
wouldn't
the
be
table
what it
for
was.
months
Oh.
to review the show and text it to you.
The views reviews.
the views reviews.
If you
private
subscribe at $10 a month, you'll get every edition of the views reviews.
No, you won't.
Don't say that on the
Yes,
air
if
because
you-
now you'll have to type them all up.
I will. I type up anyway.
That is a binding
That's true.
contract.
Every
Alright.
week I send a review. It's called the views reviews.
Yeah,
It's a private blog.
right now you just text it to me.
Well, I mean, doesn't mean it can't grow.
All right,
Once there was only one listener of this show, and look what happened.
that's true.
I'm still not convinced there are any listeners. I think
They're out there. They tweet at us. And
That's true. You know what? They actually do. They've started to interact with us.
Yeah.
On them.
They thank me for coaching a lot.
I just...
All the
don't.
time.
If you can go ahead and email coach@viewfromthegutters.com.
I'm going to set that up.
And I have
know.
a Letterman jacket that says coach on the back. So when we're at
Oh,
conventions.
my Coke Zero I bought earlier said Coach too. See?
Did it really?
Yeah.
Oh, well, there you go.
It's a
It's
sign.
meant to be.
The meme is alive.
Time to get you that Coach Letterman jacket. But this week, we're talking about Hip Hop Family Tree.
Yes, and you pitched it, Chard.
I did.
How do you feel about Hip Hop Family Tree?
I love it.
All right. Thanks for listening.
That's a wrap, kids. Great show. Send it home.
No, I mean, for a lot of the same reasons I like Stega Lee as like a historical work. It's like it's a history comic, you know?
Yeah. It actually reminded me a lot, like really, really strongly in terms of the voice with Larry Goenig's The Cartoon History of the Universe.
Yeah. And,
which is a great comic if you've never read it.
And also Project X Challengers like Fair Lady Z and Nissan Cup Noodle and what's the other one? The 7-Eleven. Because while these are historical figures, they're real people who lived and did the things that happen in the books. This is all seen through the lens of the author artists. So their dramatic decisions to frame a scene in a specific way to heighten the drama and the excitement of a scene. And whether, like, how true some of these events are to the depictions he has is, like, questionable, just because, I mean, it's been a while and how much of this stuff was actually well documented. But it is entertaining. And I think it holds true to the spirit of what was going on. And one of my favorite scenes, which was probably didn't happen exactly like this, was the two MCs or the two DJs are playing in like there's a basketball court and they're all plugged into the lampposts, and then the power goes out and everybody starts looting and they're like, I'm gonna make those speakers mine, and then both of the DJs pull out guns and are like, you guys better scram out of here.
Well, and that blackout is a hugely important one because that's the explosion of hip hop. That's where a lot of people got their equipment because they couldn't afford it.
Well, that's where those DJs
did.
So
in New York, there's this blackout, and that a lot of people attribute the massive growth of the early stages of hip hop to that blackout, which is so interesting to me as just somebody that's like kind of into like culture and counterculture and popular culture, that this random event led to this huge movement of music.
Yeah, I was gonna say, in terms of this being a history, if this was fiction, I would have several complaints. Like, there are way too many characters that are too much the same.
Yeah.
Here's a guy, he's a rapper.
Yeah.
Here's another guy, he's also a rapper. This guy, rapper.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's one of the beauties of it. As someone, I know that Chard's really into hip hop, and so am I. And the book it assumes that you know very little, and it's also, while entertaining, it's also the narration is very cut and dry. Like, this is DJ Kool Herc, like he did this is this person, and it's like obviously there's like some creative writing in it, and there's some funny stuff, but a lot of it is just like this is what happened. It's a history book, like, and then the characters interacting and their dialogue is what really makes the entertaining / story parts of it.
Exactly. And like, did those conversations happen exactly like that? No, but for the most part, like, this is why events transpired. Like, did Run DMC get their name from the guy who fronted them the money for the album, or did Russell Simmons come up with it? You know, like, it was just kind of a conversational piece thrown in. And so I think there's a lot of stuff like that where it's like, well, I mean, like he mentions, there's a guy who claims to have invented the term hip hop.
Hip hop, yeah.
And it's like,
Several
he's
guys.
one of several men to have coined this phrase, you know? And I think I mean, that's kind of how the history of a movement like this is documented, is like, well, it probably happened like this. But there are a lot of conflicting sources.
I think that's part of just the whole mythos in general, and kind of like the theme of this is just like, you know, we didn't write any of this stuff down. Like, it wasn't like we didn't know that we were, especially in like volume 1, which kind of like the book just goes chronologically. There's 3 volumes that we read. And in the first one, at least, it's very much like we did not know what we were getting into. We didn't know this was like a, you know, when people are living history, they don't know it. So it's like, we didn't take records of this. We wanted to make beats in the streets. You know what I mean? Like, we just wanted to rap. We wanted to beatbox. Like, And so I think a lot of it, that kind of, the author taking some assumptions with what happened, or, you know, no one actually knowing what happened.
Exactly.
Is not is like part of what makes it cool and kind of part of what like the hip hop like grandiose culture mythos represents.
Yeah. With any like subculture or small art movement that becomes mainstream, there's a lot of early documentation that slips by the wayside. There's a couple demos that they specifically mention in the volumes that are like, and no one knows where the demo from DJ Street Kid is or whatever. Like it didn't make it, it was enough to get him signed, but no one kept a copy of the actual demo tape. Or a lot of the early music videos, because they weren't big enough to see play on MTV, even in the later volumes, like in volumes 2 and 3, they talk about MTV a lot. Because they were playing music videos all the time, but a lot of these were only played on like local New York, like public access style television. So those videos don't exist anymore. So a lot of the early documentation is just gone.
And I think that's something that's kind of beautiful about something that can never happen again.
Yes.
Is the idea of like that stuff is lost. Like
right.
every rapper, every musician, every artist will always have every piece of everything they've ever done.
I keep like 3 backups of this show.
Because on the computer. And like obviously
right.
that's objectively, better for the world, I guess. But like it is interesting that these things were lost to history. Like, this thing that would end up being very famous and very influential was literally tape. Not like a digital copy. It was a tape that like was lost in the basement somewhere in the 90s, or you know what I mean?
And the bootlegging culture where it talks about like when they would finally do a record pressing of something, sometimes it was like multiple generations old, which means like it was copied from tape to tape to tape to tape to tape back to record, and it's like the quality just gets degraded every time you do a transfer like that. So even the stuff we do have sometimes is super degraded. I was very fascinated by the technology of this book, which is another thing they touch on a lot. But as someone who went to school for music production and audio engineering, like you see a lot of stuff in this book that you're just like, damn, like how did they even do any of that stuff? Like how did they figure that out? And the fact that vinyl is a visual recording medium.
Well, when you say how did they figure that out, like you're talking about guys who make speakers out of like oil drums and old milk crates and stuff.
Which is awesome.
They have a lot of time and no money.
Yeah.
So you're going to figure it out. Well, that's what people have always done.
And even the making break beats. So a lot of the early book covers break beats, which is essentially where you take a break of a song, and the most famous of which being the Amen break. But when you take a part of the song where the melody stops and you just have the beat going, and you loop that by you have 2 record players right next to each other, and you have a crossfader that goes between the 2 records, and the first record plays the like 4 bars of the beat. And then while that first record is playing the 4 bars of the beat, you are, without hearing it, queuing up the second record to be in the exact same spot. You can only do that on record because you can look down at the grooves. You can't do that on a tape cassette because you can't see where on the tape it all looks the same. It's electronic on a tape. It's not physical grooves.
And mind you, this is something that in these days, I don't know how interesting this is to any of our listeners, but in these days, this is something I'm physically doing as well.
I'm super interesting to all of our listeners.
So, like, obviously, you can do the same thing in Pro Tools now or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
But back then, they were physically. When Chard says there was 2 record players, he means there's 2 record players on a table. The queuing it up was holding one.
Yeah,
of them.
You're dragging
like
one.
You were
back
physically
to the
using
right
your
place.
body to do this.
Well, and then when that first record spins out at the end of the break, then you push the crossfader over to the second record, let it go, let the break play on that one, cue up the first one again, and go back. So if you want a 14-minute song, like some of these early rap songs you had to physically do that action for 14 minutes and record the output to a two-track tape recorder to make that beat. Like, that's insanity.
Oh, yeah.
From the standpoint of like what
they were also getting up there and just basically everything was freestyle.
Yeah.
Then they would have rhyme books and shit, but they were also just getting up on stage in front of sometimes huge crowds of people and just popping off whatever came off the top of their head.
And that's where the hip hop or the rapping came specific, because hip hop does not include just rap. It includes making
the
beats,
four elements of hip-hop.
Which are graffiti,
making beats, rapping, graffiti, and breakdancing.
Right, or the b-boys. Right?
Yeah, b-boys. And b-boys.
So I forgot what I was gonna. I was in the middle. I was like,
I think you were trying to say that.
Rapping. Yes, sorry. Thank you, Kenny. Rapping came as it was a continuation of that hype man DJ, like radio DJ talking over the beat, where it's like, oh, we got the the freshest playlist from east to west, like they're just talking over the intro to the song and trying to get people like hyped up about it. And so when these DJs were playing, because it was all about beats, it was all about playing the coolest cuts from records you've never heard of, that kind of like digging in the crates to try to find the coolest beats and stuff. Then you would have an MC, because it was so complicated, the hand motions, you couldn't hold a microphone too, or it was too hard for you to do both. So then you had your friend come up and MC for you while you DJ'd, right? And it like all grew out of that. And I think that for today's culture, a lot of that like physicality and why this stuff came up the way that it did is lost on a lot of people, because the technology doesn't exist in the same way that it did back then.
Well, and I think even some of the ideas. So like one thing that this book really shows that I don't think a lot of non-hip-hop fans understand is that hip-hop came about from making beats for parties. Yeah. So it was like, I think a lot of people will sometimes...
End of disco, it was dance.
Exactly.
Beats,
And it was all about dancing, it was about having fun. And I think a lot of people will both confuse where hip-hop started, and people will claim that it started from like a political standpoint or a thug standpoint. It didn't. It started from like a partying, having fun. Yeah. And also it started from the beats. Like back in those days, for probably a decade or more, the beats were the main thing, and the rapping was equal to or less than. And for a long time, less than. Like for a long time, like it was saying, it was just make some noise, y'all. And that's where it evolved. And
when I think say hey, you say hi.
Right, exactly. Just that's all it was to just have like more energy. And I think that that's something that if you are, 18 years old and you started listening to hip hop in 2004 or whatever, you might not know, which is not a judgment, but it's just something that you legitimately,
we have friends who love hip hop and love rap, and like they're 18 years old and they've only been listening to stuff for so long, right? And so there's a lot of the early days of rap, and even I'm older, but I didn't start listening to rap in 1981. I wasn't alive. And I didn't even start listening to rap in the 90s. That's your fault. I mean, it is my fault.
No, but I think that as aficionados of comics culture, which has had a long history of holding hands with hip-hop culture.
Absolutely.
You don't have to have gone back and read every single like golden age comic book in order to understand what's going on in comics today. Like, you don't necessarily have to have that deep appreciation. It might help in certain cases, but comic books, as much as hip hop, are about what's going on today, as much or more so than what was happening 30 or 40 years ago.
Yeah, I think it's cool though to, there are questions you may have never thought to ask, like why is the comic book 22 pages? Where did that start? Like, why is they magazine side? Why do they come out weekly? But like knowing about how comic books kind of came about will help inform you as to like why the comic book culture is the way it is today.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I think if there are people out there who were like, why is hip hop the way it is today? Like, this book is an awesome elementary course, and like, well, here's where all this shit started, and here's why a lot of this stuff happened.
It's interesting to me because my uncle's probably, I want to say, he's less than 20 years older than me. And
so he's less than 4,000.
He's less than 4,000 years old. But he's my dad's younger brother.
Right.
But he, like, when I was a kid, he was listening to all this shit. He was listening to NWA. He was listening to Run DMC. He was listening to Public Enemy. So I was introduced to that at a very young age. Well, the Beastie Boys, I think, was more my generation, because when I was 11 and 12, that's when Fight for Your Right to Party came out. And that was kind of...
But that's not when they started, because you didn't get a chance to read Volume 3, but Volume 3 is almost like a ton of that book is about the Beastie Boys and Rick Rubin bringing those guys up.
Right.
And that's 1983.
Yeah, no,
they were
hugely...
already a rap group at that point, which means they had transitioned from being a rock band into a rap group by 83. So
now I can't remember if Fight for Your Right was really their first kind of breakthrough hit, and then
but it was an MTV hit from like the late 80s.
No, it was from the late 80s, but I mean, all that stuff. I guess what I'm trying to say is I've kind of found the Beastie Boys on my own because at that point you couldn't not.
Right. That's true.
But like I did not list, like they would play the Beastie Boys on the rock station. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't play Run DMC or Public Enemy, who, you know, which you had kind of Run DMC who had these very like kind of New York roots, but then you had the much more like gay. NWA was West Coast, and they were much more about kind of growing up in South Central and Compton and kind of this gangster lifestyle. And then you had Public Enemy, who was rapping about the much more political, you know, racism and kind of oppression and bullshit like that. And it as a kid, as a young person listening to that, it's insane because like nothing else sounded like it.
Yeah.
And even now, like when you listen to people like Kanye rap, or when you listen to or even like Eminem, like they sound nothing like those guys. Like it has evolved so much because it basically came from guys just trying to find like the best rhymings, you know, the best way to rhyme over these beats, because they were hype men.
Well, I don't think
that's where MC comes from. They were there going, hey, let's do this. Come on.
I don't think it's just evolved. I think that it's metastatized through the music industry as a whole. And I think when you look at what modern popular music sounds like, it's got hip hop bred into it. It's part of its DNA.
And a lot of the reason for that is because producers, as a sound engineer, as a producer, as a music, not a producer. Okay, so this is confusing because producer means two different things in the music world. So you have producers as you mean it in hip hop, which is they're sitting there with an 808 and a tape machine or like sampling machines making actual physical beats. The composers of hip hop, they call producers. But in the rest of the music world, you call producers the guys that sit behind the console and like move the faders up and down next to the engineer and the tape op, that are like, okay, we're producing the album, not in the way a movie producer produces the album, because that's just the money.
More like a director.
But they're like a director of music, yeah. Right. So that term is confusing because it means three different things. So a lot of the producers, music director producers, have had their hands in hip hop stuff, have also gone on to have their hands in a lot of pop music. Guys like Rick Rubin, who are a big part of volumes 2 and 3 of this book, would go on to produce pretty much everybody you've heard from the 90s till now. He produced a couple of my favorite rock albums of all time with Blood Sugar Sex Magik. He produced System of a Down, early System of a Down.
He's done a
albums.
bunch of shit. Rick Rubin's been everywhere.
Yeah, he's done Shakira albums. He's gone everywhere. And so that kind of like, well, and obviously Beastie Boys, but that kind of cross production is something that comes really common in the music industry. Is like, just because you produced one country album doesn't mean every album you produce is going to be country. So you have this like really good free exchange of ideas within the music industry. And so I think you're right. I think all of these beats and hip-hop influences became prevalent in not just pop music, but also in rock and in country music. You hear like weird
a lot of that break mixing. I'm not sure exactly what you would call that, but that's proliferated in stuff like EDM, like Daft Punk.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, well, because you can fucking dance to it. Yeah, like, that's the whole.
Well, that free exchange of ideas is really cool too, because you have guys like Africa Bambaataa who are like, "Yeah, yo, have you heard this Kraftwerk shit? Like, we need to be making beeps and boops like they do." And he's right. I mean, like that. But what was cool about Volume 2 to me was, I had no idea how. I mean, I knew Africa Bambaataa was like a big influence on hip hop. That's a name you hear all the time from a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I listened to some of his early stuff, and I was like, okay, cool, I get what Africa Bambaataa is all about. But it wasn't until I read Volume 2 that I realized like how big of an influence he was on the production game, because he not only was he like one of the first DJs spinning albums that nobody had heard of, he was also hiding all the albums by soaking them in water, peeling the labels off, and putting other labels on so other DJs couldn't like peek over his turntables and see what breaks he was using, which I thought was crazy.
I love those scenes where he's just like in like this dark room type setup and peeling labels off and putting them on. And there's people like other DJs like peeking over like, okay, it's the name of this album. Yeah. They go home, buy it.
Right.
Like, it doesn't sound anything like it.
Exactly.
Something that would just never happen in these days.
Yeah.
And I think what Toby was saying earlier about kind of hip-hop's influence on pop music is really important because I think that hip-hop's my favorite genre, so I'm biased, but I think that hip-hop is the most diverse of basically any music genre, and I think that also in today's culture, hip-hop is basically what popular music is. Like if you turn on just a radio station, not like a country radio station, or just a regular radio station, you will hear a mix of hip-hop and like Taylor Swift
and rock.
Only a little bit of rock, though. I feel like there's not like actually that much rock on.
I guess that's changed a lot since the like early 2000s.
Yeah, like I feel like it's mainly just like you'll hear rappers, and then like you hear like Nicki Minaj, and then you'll hear Taylor Swift, and then you'll hear Kanye, and then you'll hear like
Justin Bieber.
Yeah, it's almost all hip hop and pop music, which I think is
the first thing that came immediately to my mind was Royals.
Yeah, Lord.
By Lord, like that song owes a lot more towards hip hop than it does rock. Certainly,
yeah, oh, absolutely.
Like for a long time, pop music was very, very rock dominated, and I think that Kenny's right. That's changed.
Well, there's even, and please don't ask me how I know this. I work with a bunch of people that love country music.
I know you're going to say. I know exactly what you're going to say.
But like Florida Georgia state line, man, they have an incredible hip hop sensibility, and they're fucking as redneck as you get.
Yeah, my boss loves that band. Yeah,
like they have.
It's Florida Georgia line, right?
It's I don't know if it's Florida Georgia line or Florida Georgia state line.
Yeah,
but like the cadence of their lyrics, it's very hip hop.
No, that's what I was going to say. Is my boss, my former boss, listened to country like all the time, and a lot of country, especially male country, is just rapping. Like it's not traditional rap beats, and there might be like a sing-songy chorus,
right?
But a lot of it is just like I'm rapping, but I have a twang. I'm talking about whatever, and it's
talking about trucks.
Right?
Going down to the river on
and I think
I think that you can draw a line of commonality between poor black people in Brooklyn in the 70s and poor white people in Podunkville, Florida, Georgia today. Like, poor people are going to find ways to entertain themselves that aren't luxury items. They're going to make things.
Well, and the hip-hop is a very American art form, right?
Oh, it
is an absolutely like jazz, like blues.
I think hip hop is actually the quintessential American art form. I think it has.
I mean, it includes all of the before mentioned. Yeah. I was going to say they're all very uniquely American, and I think that blues and country are in that pool of American music styles.
I think so. I think you get your modern country out of your blues tradition, but I think your blues, that's all based on like folk songs and tribal hymns and shit like that. Like there's a very strong tradition of that, and I think that hip hop is this very uniquely American, even when you look at the way it was, in its early days, in its early inception, it's very much about just kind of throwing shit together and seeing what works. I mean, last year I went and saw Kimya Dawson play with Aesop Rock. It's folk hop is what I think of it as. And like if somebody had described it to me, I would have been like, you're fucking high. There's no way this is going to work. But it works. Yeah. It's insane to me that it works because all you need is something to rap over. I mean, that's it.
And the infusion of going from DJ Hype Man to the infusion of like story rhymes into hip hop music was a big step and changed the way a lot of people thought about hip hop. And it's definitely a large part of modern hip hop, especially for guys like Aesop Rock. He's like, a lot of what he does is kind of more storytelling.
Well, and it's a lot more, I think he shares a lot more in common with somebody like Sage Francis, who's a lot more introspective or even Eminem, who I think was rapping much more about his own fucked up headspace than somebody like
Watch Old Man Joe try to name popular hip hop artists.
Popular hip hop artists.
He's gonna say Drake. He means to say Drake.
He wants to say
Drake.
He wants to say Drizzy. We all know he loves Drizzy.
I don't listen
Joe's
to Drake, but
literally
every
wearing an
time I
OVO
hear
shirt
Drake
right
mentioned, somebody is talking about how Drake is turning hip hop into like basically a teenage romance novel. That's all I hear.
He just wants it to be Degrassi. That's fine.
That's it, right? But
I don't see anything wrong with that.
Ain't nothing wrong with that.
But yeah, I think that when you listen to early 80s hip hop and it's a lot of like, and I went to the store and I grabbed some beers, and it's like that is not how people rap anymore. It's not it's not just walking down the street and saying what you did or saw. And it's funny to go back and listen to early hip hop because as much as I love it, it is like a 180 degree turn from what it is now.
Well, you listen to Rapper's Delight and it's like, hey, I'm this guy and I'm rapping to the beat. And then there's this guy over here and he's got a cool hat.
Yeah.
Well, there's this third person over there and he likes pizza.
Yeah.
And even the difference between Rapper's Delight and like NWA or Public Enemy, there's a world of difference because there was so much more emphasis put on the message, on what they were talking about.
Well, I think the whole kind of like Rapper's Delight stuff starts from what we're talking about, where it's just like, Chard, yo, get on the mic, and it's like, my name's Chard. But you know what I mean? It's just like, it wasn't necessarily you were writing lyrics.
You see them make Rapper's Delight, which is my favorite. One of my favorite parts is like, there's a guy, and he's working at a pizza store, and he's rapping along with the radio, and the music producer lady just happens to walk in and be like, hey kid, do you want to make a record? And she's like, yeah, but they can't rap in the store because the the tape machine doesn't work because it got pizza sauce on it. So they go, this is real, this happens in the book. This is my favorite part of the book. And they get into the car, and then he's rapping, and he's not really a rapper. He's actually just kind of a producer, and his brothers are the real rappers, but whatever. He was in the right place at the right time. So he's rapping over this beat in the car, and she's like, that's really good. And then another guy just comes up to the window and is like, hey, I can also rap. And she's like, get in the fucking car. And he's like, all right. And then they throw down, and then a third guy comes over and is like, me too. And she's like, I don't know. Maybe.
You guys rapping?
And then boom. And that's literally how the Rappers Delight, the band that became Sugar Hill Gang, and the label Sugar Hill Records happened right there in a pizza place and a car.
Yeah.
What? That is the
wonder. I think
that's
that
amazing.
Speaks to the beauty of hip hop. Is just that, you know, it's similar to how people talk about, you know, like, oh, you know, the stereotype, or I guess it's probably a fact, but like the idea that like, you know, not a lot of black kids or not a lot of poor kids play hockey. Because you need a lot of equipment to play hockey. You also need a fucking rink to play hockey with ice in it. And like, similar to like, you know, if you are a young, you know, poor kid in Brooklyn, you need a guitar and an amp, and then you need a space where you can set up your drums and the or you can just rap.
Right.
And you can just start saying words and do it really good.
Well, that's the thing. You don't need anything to rap. You just need to rap.
Right.
Yeah, and it's amazing to me, like, when they show the maps, it's like, okay, here's Brooklyn. And, like, they broke it up into, like, all these neighborhoods. And you had all of these different groups in these different neighborhoods, plus all the different guys who were, like, not even in the clubs. They were just at, like, house parties and
in the street,
basketball rinks, and just rapping on the street. Yeah. Like, it's amazing how dense it was.
Well, that area, was the birth of hip hop, but continues to be a thriving place for hip hop to this day. I mean, they're talking about there's like Flatbush is right near there. Flatbush, which is where Mos Def and Talib are from, but also where Joey Badass and
Flatbush Zombies, all those guys.
Yeah, Capital Steez and all those guys came from. Rest in peace, Capital Steez. But it's like where, that's where, there, when you listen to Mos Def albums and he talks about Zulu Nation and he talks about, what's the name of that dance group that was always around? They were the B-Boys. They were dance. I don't remember the name, but they're in this book, and I have heard them on the Mos Def talk about them on albums that came out 10, 20 years later. It just goes to show you like how embedded into that culture everything was, and how much of an important part of that neighborhood was as important a part to hip hop as hip hop was to that cultural region. And I think that's so cool.
I think that's something that kind of is always present in hip hop is, the callbacks to, where you're from, or, the fact that, like, on the Game's first album, he mentions Dr. Dre 158 times, like, literally, like, things like that, where it's like, it's like, the culture of hip-hop is very important to hip-hop itself.
Right.
In that, like, there's a lot of songs or albums you can listen to that you wouldn't understand, like, a lot of the references, and you wouldn't, you wouldn't get a lot of the, the references without having listened to other songs or without knowing hip hop.
Well, yeah, there's definitely call outs to quotes on other songs, but like I was just mentioning, like I've listened to Mos Def for years, probably 10 years of listening to Mos Def talk about the Zulu Nation, having no idea what it was until I picked this book up, this like for the first time. And I was like, oh, I understand a new thing about a music I like. Like those kind of moments of revelation are what I love so much about this book.
I'm going to be legit honest. I came into this knowing very, very little about hip hop or rap. And one of the problems that I did have with the book is that there are like so many names that are thrown out. And the pace of the story, it just moves so fast because they're trying to cover so much. Like I found myself honestly confused. Like, which was this guy again? Like, because they name all these groups and all the different people in the groups, and sometimes they change their names.
Right.
And like, a lot of the core people, I'm like, okay, I know who that guy is.
Right.
Like the dude in the pizza parlor. It's
Mike.
Like Big Mike.
Yeah.
Hank.
You're right. It is Hank.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I recognize the same people coming up, but there were a lot of people where it's like, oh yeah, we're just going to throw out this name about this person who didn't do anything at this time, but they heard the song.
Right. Well, yeah.
And we're like inspired.
You
by
see
it.
Dr. Dre.
Right. Like you see Dr. Dre being in, like listening to a song on the radio at the same time that some other guy is listening to it, and it's like, oh yeah, both these things happen at the same time, and it's not really relevant to what's going on, but we're going to mention it now because it's going to be important way later because these are real historical events.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the coolest parts about the book is that it is like, oh, and check out. Yeah, at the same time, this is happening. It gives you reference,
like,
right? Dre's like, 14, right?
Yeah, and I got like, okay, I know. Okay, that's Dr. Dre. I get that. If I have to level a complaint, though, I wish it was told a little bit more out of chronological order. Like maybe like when they get to the point where Dr. Dre becomes big, they can like go back and be like, oh yeah,
I can see
here are some things.
I can see your complaint.
I did feel a little bit lost.
I definitely feel like if I hadn't been so into hip hop, it would have been kind of tiring to just read like, and then this person does this and this person does this in 1980s, and it's just like it's a lot of. I don't want to say exposition, but I guess it's just a lot of information being thrown at you with no kind of context.
Don't get me wrong. Like if I wanted to study hip hop or if I wanted to teach somebody about hip hop, like especially a younger person, I'd be like, fuck, read this.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'd say it exactly that way too.
Yep. To a 6-year-old.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fuck.
But no, like, when I was a kid, I read the Cartoon History of the Universe over and over and over and over again. Even though I didn't necessarily understand a lot of the context for the things that I was reading. And I think that this like works in the same way, like is appealing on a level that somebody who's not going to read a textbook is going to read this and get something out of it.
And I do want to
I think that is important.
I do want to respond really quickly because I think the reason that it is in such a strict chronological order that it's in is not only just to like show cause and effect, but also because that's the easiest way to look back at music. Yeah. Is to be like, this is the discography and we can go back and we can like hear their first album and then their second album and then their third album. And so you can kind of like play along by getting their out. That's all you really need to know is like what era it is and what album it is. And I don't know if Ed Piskor made it or if somebody else made it, but if you go onto YouTube and you type in Hip Hop Family Tree, there is a Hip Hop Family Tree playlist.
It's awesome.
That goes like in order of when he talks about the album. So like I was reading along with Volume 1 again because it's not the first time I've read it. So I don't know that this would work if it was your first time. But I was basically reading, and as I would get past a section, that song would come on. And I was like, oh, cool, it's Sugar Hill Gang. And then I would read a little bit more, and then, Africa Bambaataa would come on, and I was like, oh, they just talked about this in the book. And it gave a lot of reference. So I think if I had to level a complaint, I guess I wish that it weren't just a comic. I kind of wish that it came with like a DVD and like a CD and like of like a multi and
reference material.
Yeah, and especially in the age of digital, and not to harp on Fantagraphics at all, because I love the physical copy of this book. I think it is 10 times the book that the digital copy is. If I could own physical copies of comics, it would be reserved for books like this that are oversized, where the paper texture matters and the cover texture. So I want to thank Fantagraphics for putting it out, but I do think it would be cool to have like a multimedia type of deal, because I think that would ease up on a lot of like, who the fuck are all of these people? Because it would give you like, oh, here's some pictures of them. Here's what they look like. Here's a music video of them. Here's a song. It would give you like a little time to decompress, because reading this in a week and just trying to like jam through a couple volumes, there's so much information that you really need to take some time and like do a little outside research too, just for fun, to lighten it up a little bit.
Totally.
Yeah.
I saw him right there with you.
Something that could be done, Fantagraphics, if you're listening,
which they are,
they totally are, is put in QR codes, because we have that set
Actually,
up
that
now.
would be cool.
And like you could just have it in the corner, on the back, something like that, and you could still have your physical copy. And if somebody's interested in having that multimedia presentation of it, it's accessible, but it's not necessary.
Yeah, it's interesting.
But one of the things I wanted to talk about is the physical experience of the book, because it is way different than reading it digitally. And I read it digitally just because I couldn't get my hands on a physical copy in time. But the paper is that old style kind of newsprint. The colors are very like undertone, like
they're very desaturated.
Yeah.
The paper is like very brown and not white.
Yeah, and so it puts you into that era, because you feel like you're reading a comic from that era. It doesn't feel like it came out in, I think the first volume came out in 2013. Yeah. It doesn't feel that new. It feels old. It feels well established, and it kind of lends credibility to it as well, because it feels like it's coming out of that era. But talking about like chronologically with music, I took a rock and roll class like years and years and years ago. And you have to study music chronologically, because otherwise it doesn't make sense. And like in the spectrum of a class, we were able to kind of go back and like, okay, remember like Blondie first saw this band at CBGB, or like stuff like that. And it's hard to do that in a comic. So I don't know how much of that is like the comic's fault that it had to follow the strict chronological order. I think that was the best way that he could have told the history of hip hop, was chronologically. Maybe with some editorial notes or something like that, but I think he did a pretty good job.
I think also, just touching on what you said a second ago about how it feels like a product of its era, having it not jump around a lot makes it really feel like it is like a comic strip that maybe was coming out at the time.
Yeah.
Because the very few times that he does jump forward in time, he changes the printing method on just that panel. Like the colors are actually saturated for that panel for the first time. And in the physical print, it's like glaringly different.
Man, I did not notice that.
Pops out. Like it's in volume 2.
Okay. But I did notice that throughout volume 1 at least, it's all printed in halftone. Yeah. Which is how comic books used to be printed. Yeah. Like if you look at it, it's all those squirmy little dots that make it look like you're looking at it on a CRT TV, which I always used to find so fascinating. And like they don't do that at all anymore. Like even if you get a reprint of an old book,
they've recolored it.
They've recolored it. You're not going to see that. Like you really have to look for those old editions or look for actual comics from that period to see it. And if you're somebody who's a newer comics reader and you've never seen that halftone style before, like go dig up some quarter bins, look for some old comics, and just look at the way that they used to physically do it, because it was cheaper.
Yeah.
I definitely think that they could have, like, one suggestion I would make is that they could have just done it in chapters, where they kind of like more clearly, like this is the beginning chapter, this is the like African Bambaataa chapter, this is the Sugar Hill Gang chapter. But I think that part of the kind of hecticness of reading how it's presented is supposed to like kind kind of engulf you in it. So it's a kind of like how it was. Like there was just all this thing happening. There was a major cultural revolution that would last the rest of humanity happening here in these few years in Brooklyn. I think that's kind of, it's supposed to be hectic. It's supposed to be like really intense. It's supposed to be kind of confusing. I think this party atmosphere. I think that was a deliberate decision.
3 volumes covers 4 years.
And so much of that is...
It's a lot.
I think it's so important to keep, those moments, they flow into other moments.
Yeah.
I think there's a movie called 24-Hour Party People, which is about Factory Records. And Factory Records was very big in the post-punk Britpop scene to the point where they actually were. Like Blur, Buzzcocks, all those great Britpop bands come out of Factory Records. And most of that can be traced to one show that the Sex Pistols did in Manchester in 1976. And in the crowd were 2 future members of the Buzzcocks, 2 future founders of Factory Records, Ian Curtis, who would go on to form Joy Division, I think, and a couple other people from there. Fucking Morrissey was in the audience. And these guys went and saw this show and were so blown away by it that they went out and started making their own music.
Yeah.
And they didn't just make music. They made, some of the greatest music of that era. And that moment is so important because from that, everything else follows. And so you need to have those moments. Right. And telling them in order, I think, I agree with Kenny. I think this shit was happening right on top of the other, this shit was spreading like wildfire. People were like, oh God, we got to get in on this. We got to I want to sound like this. And the most interesting thing to me is that how much money wasn't even a thing into this. People were like, no, we're just doing this to have fun, to have a good time.
Right.
Well, it seemed like a lot of them didn't think there was any money in it.
They were just doing it to do it.
Like I said before, when you're in the middle of a cultural revolution, when you're in the middle of something like this, you don't think like it's going to be a big thing, right? It's not history to you. It's not an event to you. It's just your life.
And your first instinct when you're doing something like this is not to run out and necessarily monetize it.
Well, I think that the two
Patreon.com.
I think that the big thing to remember about early hip hop was it was a moment. It was like Kenny said, is about the beat first and not about the MC. But it was about the moment. Like you're at a party and therefore the hip hop beats are happening. To record it would be it would be pointless. It would be a waste. Like, why would you put it on a record? We don't need that. We're going to a party. You can't go to a record. And so it was just a very big disconnect between the way the music had been preserved before and the way that hip hop and breakbeat artists didn't really care to preserve their art form because it wasn't about what they were making. It was about what they were making the crowd feel. And so if you're not recording it, you can't really get paid. But that's not to say the guys there weren't in it to get paid. Because it mentioned several times with DJ Herc just had a cush gig. So he didn't change what he did.
Was DJ Hollywood, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
He was doing 5 gigs a night.
Yeah, and he was making real money.
I tried to cut an album and it didn't work, and I don't give a fuck because I got these other things going on, and I'll just do that.
And so getting paid was definitely a part of the deal. But it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to become a breakbeat artist because I want to get paid. It was it was a reverence of the craft. Yeah. Especially for the young kids, it was I saw this breakbeat artist, I'm going to do that. Or I could do that. There was a lot of moments in the book that were like that, like the concert you're talking about. They're just they saw somebody and they were we can fucking do that. And then they turned to their brother and they're like, you got a rhyme book? Let's go.
Because it's just I don't think you think about monetizing something or how you can be successful at something when you're literally inventing it.
Right.
When there's no other context for besides
unless
music.
You're Thomas Edison.
Right. But yeah, there's no kind of context for people now grow up I want to be a rapper, I'm going to put out an EP and I'm going to put it on YouTube and
but it
didn't exist anymore. Right. That plan, that kind of business model did not exist.
Right.
Well, it's crazy to me too how many of these starting out artists were really young kids.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
They constantly throughout the comic, they're like, well, we have to ask our mom if we can stay out that late. Right. Stuff like that.
Like, he has to go on first because he has a curfew.
Yeah, things like that. And I guess I never realized, like, I don't know that much about hip hop, but I didn't realize it was started by kids that were that young.
Yeah, I mean,
like,
am I right in my memory that Queen Latifah was part of this whole scene
Queen
as
Latifah
well?
That was later.
Right? Yeah, I think it was a little bit later. I could be wrong.
No, she is New York, right?
She's Chicago.
Okay.
I played a big role in Chicago. Like
I feel like I watched Behind the Music or something about her at one point, talking about how she was just starting out like in middle school or high school, just like rapping on the playground.
I mean, and that definitely was later after like this had spread off the coast, because something about the early days of hip-hop that's really cool about Hip Hop Family Tree is that it is tracing a local movement, because until one of them cut until Sugar Hill Gang and Tim the Third was his name?
It was King
Tim the Third?
Third, yeah.
Until those records came out, which are like arguably the first hip-hop cuts on record, other parts of the country weren't even experiencing this revolution yet. Mm-hmm. And it's funny that you had Europeans experiencing rap revolution or the hip hop revolution through the art, the graffiti art, and through like screenings of this graffiti art documentary that they happened to put hip hop beats over before most of America had experienced the hip hop boom. And that's why it influences house beat makers in Europe. And,
absolutely.
It's definitely because of that kind of stuff.
The whole EDM thing grows out of this whole like tradition of remixing songs, and that all comes out of this, because it was all about just like
breakbeats were the beginning of that.
The lyrics to this song are really good, but would sound much better with this beat.
Yeah,
right. And then just doing
Queen Latifah was from New Jersey, by the way, just to fact check so we don't spread misinformation.
And she was late 80s, early 90s. She was definitely third wave.
Mm-hmm. God, I had a thought and then it just totally blew out of my brain.
Kayleigh looked like she had another check mark on the list to move down.
I wasn't. Oh, I wanted to talk about, we've kind of discussed this a little bit in the chronological order. Mm-hmm. The first portion of it feels really scattered, and that might turn off some people while they're reading it, because it's so strictly chronological and because there's so many names being thrown at you, and especially if you don't know hip hop, it's hard to follow. Once you get towards the end of the first volume and into the second and third volumes, it definitely follows like a much more solid narrative. So I would recommend to people who are reading this who might start to feel frustrated, just keep with it, because it starts to make sense. And it's actually totally worth it.
I feel like you could even just start at the beginning of volume 2. Like if you weren't like totally sold on getting a ton of names and people thrown at you and basically being like, and he played this one show that one time, and this guy was in the audience, and then he played that show that one time, and then he knew a guy named this, and they did a thing. And it was like, if you don't really need all of that, because that's what Kenny was saying about a cultural movement, is like these guys had an impact on a cultural movement that was massive, but they didn't know they were having a cultural impact, so maybe they didn't stick with it, and they were like, I did one show. And then I was like, not for me, and walked on. But like for this book, it's important to like throw all those like dominoes in and not leave anybody out who had an influence. But Kayleigh's right. Once you get past that early, like everybody's having this big influence on like this
like
culture.
Small area.
And it moves into like a more classic narrative of like, okay, it's mostly about Sugar Hill Records and also about a couple of producers on the West Coast and the Beastie Boys and Rick Rubin's influence and all of this. Like, then it starts to become a more palatable narrative.
Yeah.
I remember the thing that I was going to say.
All right, do it.
It is astounding to me that the way that most of the country was kind of exposed to hip hop was 2020.
Yeah.
Like, that just feels so weird looking back today. Like, nobody knew about it.
Yeah.
And then everybody watched 2020 and then they knew about it. Like, that is so the opposite of the way that I think things come up today.
Oh, yeah.
And the way that you, like, kind of people get gradually exposed to it through different paths. And, you know, it'll be on 4chan, and then it'll be on Reddit, and then it'll go from Reddit to this other website. And there's a much more of a networked growth versus just like one group, one news company decides we're going to do a 10-minute piece on this thing.
Right.
And like, that's how everybody finds out about it. And 2020 is such like an old white person thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It just, I read that and was astounded.
Well, I feel like a part of that is just that like, that's not really how things grow anymore.
No.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like how many people do you think were like actively in the hip hop scene like back then? Like 100, let's say. And like, you know, if I have YouTube videos that have 5,000 views, like, and like that's nothing, right? Like that, like I'm not fucking on 2020, right? So like, the idea is like, there's lots of things that exist in the internet age where you're saying they get popular on 4chan and Reddit that are just like out there that it's not necessarily like no one knows about it and then everyone does. It's more like no one knows about it. Maybe some people know about it. These channels know about it. And it kind of is more of an like organic.
Permeates,
permeate. It's a perfect word. Yeah, it just kind of like grows organically.
Right. Well, we were talking about this before we started recording, Kenny. I'm pointing at Kenny. This is not a TV show.
It would be if we had a video camera.
I don't want a video camera in here. Kenny and I were talking about how this would be so different if the internet were involved because just like, oh, I wonder where this break is from. Well, let me fucking Google it. Like, you know, like there's so
many sound.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like, it's a different era of like digging through the crates. Like, crate digging is like something that's what DJs did to find cool breaks.
And when we say that, we mean literally going to like old record stores or their mom's basement or whatever and going through crates and records and saying, oh, this looks interesting.
We're talking about like records that nobody listened to.
Yeah, absolutely.
These were the good records. Records nobody listened to, records they could afford. So cheap records, like 25 cents, you know, like just the garbage records they were going to throw out. And listening through to find that one like 4-second break to use as a beat, you know? And that takes time and dedication on a level that a lot of people just don't. They're not invested in their craft in the same way, or they're invested in a completely different way that does not involve that amount of research, you know?
And like the internet too has just kind of changed how hip hop works and how all music works and how everything works in all of our lives in every way.
I mean, Kanye would not be Kanye without the internet.
Right.
You know, Wolfgang,
Odd Future.
Yeah,
that's what we were talking about.
They would
earlier.
not be who they are without the internet. I mean, there's no way I would have heard of Capital Steez and Joey Badass probably without, you know, just articles and YouTube and stuff like that, because they're thousands of miles away from me.
Yeah, which is like it's beautiful because, you know, it allows everyone to do what they want to do and get their music out there. Right. It levels the playing field in that way. But it does also take away some of the, you know, craft of it and some of the kind of, you know, like you know, rapper, like the big like thing people say is like, oh, rappers don't even or DJs don't even spin vinyl these days. Like they just have, you know, laptops and blah blah. Like that's not. Yeah. I don't like that criticism because I think that's like anti-technology, curmudgeon old people. But it does change something in that feel of like, I spent 4 hours looking through my grandma's records only to find this, you know what I mean? Rather than like,
it's not like producers don't sample now, you know? Right. It's not like they still aren't looking for that sweet sample to throw under stuff, but it just takes a different form, you know? It's different kind of work. It's different kind of vacation. You've got producers like, you know, Flying Lotus and stuff who definitely like spend a lot of their time digging through old recordings, and it shows up in their music. So, I mean, they're still doing it. They're just doing it differently.
Well, one thing that's interesting that the first volume went into a lot of depth about was sort of this idea of groups as gangs. And like the rivalries that like kind of broke out of it, and you didn't hear about those rivalries unless you were at these shows,
right?
And like you heard somebody call out the other group, and then they would have like a battle or whatever,
right? And they were like faux battles. These aren't like riots and they would I love the staged like call outs on the streets where like the two hip hop groups would walk by each other, and you know, like Grandmaster Flash's group is there and they're all like, you better look out, we're gonna toast you all at the next show. And they're like, and then it was like all fake, and they're like, I hope
like
they
5
bought
minutes
that, you know?
later they're hanging out together.
Because they were you know, both they're all kind of in this culture together, but it was kind of like that WWE mentality of like, let's get the crowd hyped up.
I was just gonna say that there's a reason why hip hop is so related to comic books and wrestling and all of these kind of like grandiose fantasy type things.
It was like sweet costumes. Oh my God, Kenny and I were watching Africa Bambaataa videos before this of the Planet. What is it? Planet Rock.
Planet Rock.
Yeah. The fucking Afrofuturist costumes, man. They look like George Clinton in Parliament. They look like P-Funk. And it is so fucking cool. And I was showing Kenny what P-Funk was because he didn't know, and I was like,
"Oh my god,
they got here in a goddamn spaceship, Kenny." George Clinton just climbed out of a
literally walks out of a spaceship, and
then he's like, "Go park my ride."
Come on, Kenny, haven't you ever watched the classic 1990s comedy PCU starring Jeremy Piven?
No.
Oh my god, have you guys not seen that?
Oh my god, you have to.
That's probably
hilarious.
I don't think
I have
so.
the DVD. You can borrow it.
I don't think I have
that
to
movie
see
is
that.
perfect.
I don't
It's
know
also
about
got
that.
Jon Favreau in it and Jessica Walters.
Yeah.
So it's got
and
Archer's
David
mom and
Great.
David Spade.
That's excellent. Good
Anyway.
job, guys.
Anyway, the thing I wanted to say
yeah,
about
go
the
ahead,
rivalries and things, going back to that, was I'm sure everybody by now has heard about the Nicki Minaj, Miley Cyrus VMA call out.
Oh, yeah.
Where
Nicki's slaying everybody.
yeah,
Just
it's
killing
great.
careers, Staley.
Perfect.
Why did nobody tell me that Nicki and Taylor Swift were going to perform together?
I don't
Maybe
know.
you
It's
should
not
pay
like-
attention to
cheated
things.
that
I
did
don't
not
I
know.
don't
do
have a
that.
Twitter account. That's not
Yeah.
true.
I do.
Anyway.
I
All
just
these happens
never
on
check
Twitter
it
now,
because
dude.
nobody tweets at me.
I'll tweet
Anyway.
at you.
It's kind of been like the thing everybody has been talking about. Like I was at work and Riley had mentioned it. You know, things like everybody's talking about
It's that
it.
water
And,
cooler conversation.
yeah. And it's like, oh yeah, Nikki totally called out Miley and it was awesome and da-da-da-da. And that is not something that would have happened like at the beginning. And that's something that's really unique to having like this internet culture where everybody's kind of involved and invested in.
It's the localizing of the U.S. culture, right? Where
Right.
it's like that you definitely would have had those conversations had you lived in Brooklyn in 1981 in this specific
Right.
neighborhood
In
and
those
had been
food
at,
And you,
at that
but
show.
if you happen to be at
Right.
that show,
But then now it's everywhere.
Yeah.
You know? But it's that on a larger
It's
scale.
all up on the tweeters.
Right. And I mean, that is a massive difference between the birth of this culture in a technologically, in the age that they were technologically in versus, the technology age that we're in now. And I guess that's kind of what I was saying about you wouldn't have seen any of
Yeah.
this.
well, when
but-
I first started my point, it was relevant, and then it kept getting sidetracked, and that
Oh,
was a
well.
little less relevant. But
Yeah,
As you do.
I think you are correct in that we would not have seen, living in Washington, thousands of miles away, we would not have seen the rivalry between the Grandmaster Flash and what was the other one? The Furious
Five.
Cold something,
Crush.
Cold Crush. We would not have seen that.
Cold Crush. Yeah.
I think so. Yeah. I can't remember names, so this book is like a nightmare for me. I love it,
Yeah.
and I'm lucky I recognize even half of these, but it is like I'm not going to remember everybody's name, and I resolved
tell me
myself
who
to that.
everybody in
No.
Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five.
Well, I can
are.
name most of them.
Well, I think that's-
there's Cowboy, there's Melly Mel, there's two other ones.
also Cowboy.
And then
Raheem.
Raheem, and then and then two more guys.
Well, I think like what Kayleigh's saying is what this book kind of like why this book is so interesting because like we've said, it's because this is something that no one knew about. Like this is something that everyone in America knows what hip hop is, knows what rap is, heard a rap song,
Right.
And 30 years ago, 40 years ago,
Nobody.
six people did. If you lived in this 4 blocks of Brooklyn, you knew.
Right.
Otherwise, you didn't.
Yeah. I just think it's also cool to note how big of an influence disco and funk were on hip hop because the costumes and the like flashy lights and the sequins and the leather jackets and all of that I think of as primarily like 70s attire. That 70s fashion definitely bled over into the early 80s and all their fucking sweet sunglasses.
Yes.
Everybody has
And
cool
the
ass sunglasses
best
in here.
hats.
Yeah.
Perfect hats.
So cool. We need more of those, like, just the sci-fi ass, like single Geordie LaForge.
The Doc Brown glasses from when he goes to 2015.
Yeah, some of those.
We need to sell those.
There's definitely the ones that are like, they look like Cyclops' visor.
Yeah.
Right, they're just one solid piece.
And then
Yeah.
they've got the, like, plastic on the outside of them even.
Yeah.
I want more of those.
Those are the best ones.
Yeah. Like, to think that was cool and then went away blows my mind, because that's still cool. How did that ever go out of style?
Everything comes around on the guitar again.
Yeah, I guess the Afrofuturism movement of hip hop was a really big deal too, I think, with the influence of Kraftwerk and electronic music on Afrika Bambaataa. When you hear him talk about the 808 and like wanting to get drum machine sounds and wanting to get these like crisp, like technological sounds into hip hop, I think, because everybody who listens to hip hop knows the impact that the 808 has on hip hop, but I think it was cool to watch it happen.
Yeah, I think it's funny because so much of that seems like a natural evolution. Mm-hmm. But I think the interesting thing to me is that now, it used to be this very. It was you had a DJ and an MC, and you had to have those things,
right? And
you have that up until like the mid '90s, but then producers became much more prevalent. So you had, one person kind of producing several artists and just producing the beats, and so the MC kind of rose to prominence.
Yeah,
and now you've got both. You've got people that just spin. You got people that just do the DJ part and just.
More often than not, does that. More often than not, now you have artists who just have who are produced by several people. Like, it's pretty rare that you find like this artist only works with this person,
absolutely.
right? Like a lot of it is just like if you look at the credits of an album, there's 15 songs and 13 different producers because it's just less about that.
Yeah,
but it's more about making the hit. It's more about, but I think you still have, and maybe less in. Popular hip hop, you have a lot more of that, but in the, I guess, less popular underground hip hop, you have much more. I think the duo is still strong there.
I don't know about that because of the way how easy it is for technology to get around. I mean, even up and coming hip hop artists can contact up and coming hip hop producers from across the country, and you have guys who maybe aren't the best known producers around, but like Free the Robots and stuff that can get their beats to kids in New York and sell them to them. And then they've put one Free the Robots beat on their track. And then maybe another beat is Flying Lotus. And maybe you had enough money to get a Neptune's beat, or, you'll definitely use any beat you can find. And it's easier now than ever to just go through SoundCloud and find somebody who fits your style.
I feel like there's a mix. I feel like there's always going to be that, like, what the first volume of this book especially shows is how much like camaraderie and crews and groups matter to hip hop, and I think that kind of stuff still exists. Like, you still have like Run the Jewels, for instance, like a really big thing with LP and Killer Mike, who are like a duo, and same thing with like even like Atmosphere, which is not like traditional hip hop, but like it's still like an MC and producer combo, and I feel like it's definitely less. I feel like you have less of a connection between producer and MC these days, but I feel like that kind of that group will always be like, even if it's unspoken. It's like Kanye, right? Like Kanye produces. He doesn't just produce for anyone. Like he doesn't just let anyone produce his albums. There's a sound. There's a feeling. There's a group.
Right. But even guys like Odd Future, who they do have some producers amongst them, like Left Brain and all that, who they do have some duos in the midst of Odd Future, like Haji Beats and Left Brain. They aren't just that, and a lot of those guys are making beats for themselves because the technology's changed so much that you can actually do that.
Right. Well, yeah, I think you're always going to find the exception to the rule, but I think that there is something to be had for somebody you make good music with.
Yeah,
Well, and something that's even more prevalent now, I think, in today's culture is just like very, very small rappers, like kid who decides he wants to rap.
Yeah,
will just download like famous beats and rap over them, and they just put them out as mixtapes, and it's just kind of like a.
Or maybe not even rap music, just straight up rock music.
Anything,
like the Childish Gambino mixtapes that were
all just like famous indie rock songs.
They were just indie rock songs.
Right.
I'll just rap over these.
And so just like, I'm not going to charge for this. I'm literally 14. I live in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I just want to make rap music and put it on SoundCloud. So I just took beats. Like, you're not doing anything wrong. It's kind of like, that is part of the evolution of hip hop, I think, in the sense of like that kid's doing that, and 30 years ago, Grandmaster Flash like mixing, songs that weren't his too. I think that's kind of a interesting evolution of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this book goes a long way to show definitely what's different from today, but also like even as much how far things have come, but that things are still they're still about the same things. It's about the craft, it's about the music, and it's always been like a music first.
I'll also say that culture. I think we spent a lot. Sorry, Joe.
Oh, no,
I think we spent a lot of time talking about hip hop on this show because that's what the book's about.
Yeah.
But I think that even if you have no interest in it, and even if you don't have that much of an interest in history, the book's still interesting.
It is.
You do gain value if you are in hip hop or in history, but it's not as if you'll be totally lost and the book isn't interesting at all. There's still good narratives. There's still good stories.
It is very dense, and I recommend taking breaks, listening to some records. Kind of doing a little side research on just to lighten it up a little bit. But I think it's such an important work, and it's very cool. I think Ed Piskor's from New York. He sounds like David Cross.
He sounds exactly like David Cross.
He sounds like young David Cross in the interviews. But I think it's cool that he was like, I can't do graffiti. I'm not a b-boy. I can't dance. I can't rap, and I can't make beats. So this is the way that I'm going to contribute.
And this is in the video that Char was talking about. If you Google Hip Hop Family Tree playlist or something on YouTube.
Hip Hop Family Tree. It'll be like the first thing on there. There's Ed Piskor's talking about it, and he talks about that this is kind of what he has to give back to that culture.
Well, and how...
that gave so much to him, too, which is cool.
I think it's really a beautiful thing. It's so beautiful to me that this is a thing. It's beautiful to me, too, that... people like Larry Gonick are doing that kind of thing that they're telling, because Larry Gonick doesn't just do like the cartoon history of the universe. He does cartoon history of calculus and chemistry and
the United States.
Yeah, like all kinds of crazy shit. And like he researches it. He's not giving you fluff. And I just think that's so beautiful to me. It's so beautiful to me that Ed Piskor sat down and did this,
and is still doing it. The ongoing series,
it's amazing to me, because I think it's a story that needs to be told. Like this is hip hop culture it's
American culture.
It is American culture, and it's huge, and so many people don't know where it came from.
Yeah,
and. I think it's so important to know that, because even if you're not, I think it is a quintessential American story, because it's about, there's a whole group of people in this country that talk about pulling your stuff up from your bootstraps and blah, blah, blah. These were a group of people that wanted to make fucking funky beats. They wanted to make music, and they found a way to do it.
Yeah, it's so cool. I love this book.
I think if someone were to come to me and say, how do I learn about hip hop? I would give them this.
Yeah.
Like I would give them the 3 volumes of this, say, read this over a month and take breaks to like when you hear a name that you don't know, go on YouTube and listen to the album they're talking about. Or
right. And there's a discography in the back of every book.
Yeah.
That he like notes. So you can go look up the album name and the year it came out and just like listen to that.
Especially because something that I think as a hip hop fan that's really important to rap that you touched on earlier, which was that, a lot of this stuff isn't the best beats in the world or the most lyricism. Like it's important, and probably in all genres of music. I just don't know anything about any other genres but rap. It's really important to take it for what it was and understand the context. For instance, like something that's really popular right now is a lot of young kids, including a lot of my friends, don't like Eminem because they don't understand the impact. Like Eminem was the biggest and best rapper for a long time, and he was huge, absolutely monumental to rap, but like a lot of that kind of angriness doesn't resonate with kids in this age.
It's the same thing as like people who read comics and are like, I don't understand The Dark Knight Returns. It's like, it's the context is important. Like you weren't there, and so I trying to put that into context for people who weren't there is hard.
And whether you like it or not, I guess what I'm saying is whether you like it or not, like you probably not if you're someone who listens to a wide array of music, you're probably not going to think that the first Sugar Hill Gang song you listen to is really good.
It's so cool, though.
It is cool. But it's important to recognize the impact it had.
Oh, yeah. I think the book does a good job of doing that, and I really hope that Ed Piskor never, ever stops making this, because he's like 40 years behind. So, like, catching up to the present day, I mean, another 40 years ago.
He's going to have to do like 20 volumes.
He'll just be able to do this. Well, it's an ongoing now, and I don't know if it's an ongoing reprinting the volumes, because I missed it. It came out on the 19th of August, 2015.
I don't know.
And I didn't read it, so I don't know if it's the continuation, if it's volume 4 is essentially the ongoing, or if he went back a little bit to put them out as singles. I hope it's volume 4, because I'm excited to read it.
Because I know that he's released excerpts in Free Comic Book Day.
Yeah, there's 2-in-1 and 3-in-1.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that the ongoing hopefully continues the story, and I hope he makes it forever. So thank you, Ed Piskor.
Yeah.
We dug it.
And we hit it this week and we hit it last week, but there is an entire realm of biography and history comics out there. So if either this or Stagger Lee interested you as a listener, go check out some other stuff because there is a lot of cool books out there.
Off the top of my head, I would recommend Union Station and Capote in Kansas from Andy Parks. Those are both excellent.
And Persepolis, which we previously covered.
Yep.
Fun Home by Alison Bechdel is a great biographical comic.
Set in a very similar time period now that I'm like thinking about it. It starts in the 70s, so...
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff out there.
Fun Home? Fun Home?
No, I know. She's in New York in the 70s, but I think she's like 14 at the time.
She might be, yeah.
Because it's definitely... They go to New York to visit because her dad is... probably having extramarital affairs with...
Well, she goes back home because her dad has died. And
but she's in college.
Largely a memoir of her when she realized that her father was a closeted homosexual and he had been keeping that from her.
And you can listen to us talk about it on Out of the Fridge.
Isn't Fun Home also a play?
It is now,
Okay,
Tony Award winning play.
Yeah, I have a friend of mine who's like really into stage theater, and I just see like Fun Home all over my social media. I just thought it was a play.
Also,
I didn't know it was a comic.
A bunch of students at a big famous university have refused to read it because they're closed-minded and ridiculous.
Kit was talking about this. Isn't it the town that she's from?
Yes.
They're right next
I don't
to
think the university will sue you if you say their name.
Is it Davis?
No, it's not Davis.
No,
Davis
we just can't remember.
Okay,
We're not trying to not
Joe just
say
said it in a way that I thought he was trying to like hide it.
We can't remember.
Ukiah.
It's near there.
No, there's a big one, like one of the big middle.
I think it was Davis, and I think that was something else. It was a different book. But yeah,
Wasn't it Persepolis?
well, no, there was something.
Yeah,
there was something in one of the
There's-
big Midwest. Hold on.
There's some
Talk
every
amongst
It's okay.
yourselves.
Just
year
Google
there's
it.
some
Everyone already
asshole who
knows.
decides that they don't have to be exposed to new ideas.
Right.
Yeah.
That's fine.
And they're
It doesn't
like-
matter where. It doesn't matter what. They're
Anyway.
always
Well, I don't have to
They're
say it on
always
air, but
wrong.
now I'm
They're always
curious
dumb.
about it.
Read Fun
That's
Home. It's
fine.
good, and then listen to that Out of the Fridge episode that I'm on. It's excellent.
But are you guys ready to move on
number
to Rex?
161.
no, it's not that episode.
Number
It is.
84.
It was Duke. It's Duke. And that's what I
Okay.
thought it was.
Okay.
I Googled Fun Home, no read.
He is a word.
Great.
Good job,
right.
Joe.
Hey, got him the results he needed.
Yeah,
Wow.
no, that's
I am
what it's
awesome.
all about. I did want to mention one thing before we move on to Rex. It is interesting to read this, and I think I mentioned this at the beginning of the episode, and through the lens of Ed Piskor, because it's like he wasn't there, and he's probably getting his sources from a lot of different places. He's definitely doing his research, but it is interesting to see his depictions of certain people that I've seen in interviews, like Russell Simmons specifically off the top of my head, who just looks like a crazy person through most of this book.
Yeah.
And I was like...
He clearly does not like him.
Well, I was just like, I wonder what prompted him to like make him into that kind of character. Does he know stuff that I don't know? Or I wonder how Russell Simmons...
Or was
feels
Russell Simmons
about-
perceived differently back then?
Yeah.
Also, one thing just before I go that I'll say is that, as I was saying earlier, even if you're not interested in like rap music, this is still an interesting book because it talks about all the elements of hip hop.
Right.
There's a lot of art talk. There's even like punk music. There's a little bit about punk. Like it's much more than just like reading rapper names. Like it's about a lot of cultural stuff.
Yeah, it's New York at the time, so there's CBGB and Basquiat and all these guys that were coming up around the time. Well, CBGB is a place, but all these places and
all
people,
these buildings going up.
people and places that were happening.
CBGB just closed now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
They
yeah,
tore it down and built a McDonald's.
Yay.
Really?
No. I
No
don't
idea.
they built
Probably.
something.
It's New York.
Yeah.
They tear it down and build something.
Yeah. Well, there you go. But yeah, I recommend this to people. Check it out. It's fun. I'll keep reading. But yeah, let's move on to recommendations.
All right.
Kenny,
And I'm
you
going to
gonna
start
start?
with a fan pitch.
Yeah, do it.
We have one of our Patreon relief pitches this week from Brian May.
Hooray.
And Brian has asked that we pitch Gunnerkrigg Court, which is a book that I pitched a couple of times before. And I'm going to go with volume 1 since he didn't specify how much to recommend.
All of it.
This is a really interesting web comic that you can actually read for free online. It's also been printed by Archaea Press in some really nice hardcovers.
Cool.
And this is a story of Antimony Carver, who I think at the beginning of the story, she's 14. Mm-hmm. And she goes to Gunnerkrigg Court, which is this insanely massive industrial complex, one small part of which is a school. Mm. And it exists right next to a magic forest. And the story is kind of largely about the conflict between the court, which is like very science-based and like very orderly, and the forest, which is magical and chaotic. And it's about Antimony and her friends going through the school, kind of learning about the court and the forest and encountering various weird things like robots and shadow creatures and ghosts and fairies and ancient gods and demons and all kinds of crazy stuff.
Wombats?
No wombats.
Wombats aren't mystical or crazy.
Hey!
They're just regular animals.
That's a regular ass animal.
They're amazing animals. They're amazing.
So it's like
they have a backwards pouch.
I do.
It's like Harry Potter, but if everyone was muggles.
If Harry Potter was like a really awesome webcomic that didn't suck and was about cool people.
Wow.
That was the sound of Kayleigh punching Toby in the face.
Sorry, I got to twist the knife in Kayleigh from time to time, so I know she's still there.
I put
also because she raided my bookshelf for her pitch this week.
Well, I mean that's
no, it didn't. Fuck you.
Wow.
There we go. Hey, language. As your coach, I command you to calm down.
That's how coaches work.
Yes, it is. That's how coaches work here, Joe. As your coach, I command you to shut the heck up.
The artwork starts out a little bit rough, gets really awesome really fast. It's one of my favorite webcomics, and it's an absolutely great series. You should definitely check it out.
Cool.
Is it one of your favorites or his favorites?
Both.
I'll allow it.
More than one person can like it then.
Boat.
You don't get to not allow it. As
Kayleigh has demonstrated, more than one person can like a thing.
That is true.
So who would like to pitch next?
I'll go.
Okay.
All right.
I'm pitching Old Man Logan.
Yeah. I don't know why everyone's laughing.
Just a good book.
Yeah.
It's by Mark Millar and Steve McNiven.
Yep.
It is 6 total issues.
Yep.
And I'll read a small bit of the premise here, because I actually think the book's interesting if you don't know much about it. Mm-hmm. But this little bit of premise just says, set over 50 years in the future, it uses a similar premise to another Miller book, Wanted, I guess, in which the world's supervillains band together to finally destroy all superheroes. It's basically nothing like Wanted, I don't think. It's been a long time since I've read Wanted, but... it's really interesting. It's kind of a apocalyptic future, kind of different take on the Marvel Universe and Wolverine. Mm-hmm. It's 6 issues, so it's a pretty short read, and I think that all of you will really love it.
I think that there was a massive missed opportunity in that book with the Hulk. That's just my 2 cents. I like that story a lot.
Always with the Hulk.
But man, the villains won. That means the Maestro should be there, but instead we get like... lame inbred Hulk kids.
Yeah.
I mean, that's literally the worst part of the story. If you can ignore the inbred Hulk kids, it's a road trip where Wolverine and a blind Hawkeye drive across the country through a dinosaur-filled middle of America to go confront villains on the East Coast. It's pretty fun.
I like it.
As far as like a one-and-done Marvel What If, I think it was pretty rad. I know that Joe hates it.
Joe's a big
fan. I don't
fan.
hate all of it. I really like the road trip aspect of it.
It's great.
But there are parts that I feel are very...
The reason why Joe...
Not the best Mark Miller.
No,
writing.
and I will be first to admit that he misuses the Hulk like horribly in that. And there's some other missed opportunities.
I feel like if that whole book had just been Logan and Hawkeye just being like...
Yeah.
Road tripping, I think it could have been really interesting and introspective, but he gets a little Mark Miller at the end.
Yeah, again, the end, which involves Hulks, is not the best part. Yeah. Not the best part.
Now to see which comic Joe will pick off the comic wall as uses his pitch for this week.
I have my pitch.
Whoa, you're prepared?
Look, he's looking
I'm prepared.
over.
No, I'm totally prepared this week.
My pick is The Walking Dead.
I would rather eat my own legs off than ever read The Walking Dead ever again.
If you do decide to eat your own legs off, I'm not saying you should. I'm just saying...
I'll let you videotape it.
Yeah, thank you. I want to watch.
Yeah.
Robot legs.
So I've recommended this before, but I did it on somebody else's recommendation. I actually got my hands on it and read it last night, and I have to pitch it again. And I may pitch it until we pick it. I'm pitching The Unbeatable Squirrel Girl.
Yay.
And I will say it's about the Unbeatable Squirrel Girl and her adventures in trying to be a regular college student and not being very good at that.
What's her name? Noreen?
Doreen Green is her name. And in this, she fights Craven, the hunter,
Galactus,
Whiplash, and Galactus.
Yeah. Just for the record, she does not unearn the name the Unbeatable Squirrel Girl. She's beaten Galactus, Thanos, and Doctor Doom by herself.
She's... And what really sells this, I mean, it's beautifully drawn and it's a lot of fun, but what really sells this is it's Ryan North of Dinosaur Comics. Mm-hmm. And I can seriously count on one hand the number of comic books that have made me laugh out loud. Not just like chuckle, but fucking laugh out loud. This is one of them.
The tiny words at the bottom of every page.
He writes. He's got this subscript going on under the panels.
Well, it's like when you mouse over his webcomics and it pops up with text.
Yes.
And I love that Marvel let him do that. I love that he chose to do that. But it's like little shit that like Squirrel Girl or whoever's in the panel is kind of saying to themselves.
My favorite is like right in the beginning, she's digging through all these boxes in Avengers Mansion attic, and then it's like not pictured, tiny Ant-Man pants.
Tiny like Ant-Man, tiny boxes labeled like Ant-Man costumes or something like that. And at one point, she's like carrying all these boxes, and then some guy on campus stops her, and he's like, yeah, you're carrying a lot of boxes. That must be really heavy. And she's like, oh, that's right. Normal people can't carry really heavy boxes. It's just like, shit like
she
that.
Has the proportional strength
of a squirrel. She's got squirrel blood. She's got half
She's
squirrel
got
blood.
partially squirrel blood.
She's got partially squirrel blood. So, after reading it, I wanted to pitch it here just because it's so much fun. And I think that this is what comic books are all about. You know, it's a great book for any age.
Yeah. And definitely teens and above for sure. But
kids, younger kids probably wouldn't, but
I don't know if they get it.
No, there's not anything that's necessarily bad for them. They just might not.
They might not fully appreciate it, but
that's all I'm saying.
My God, is it good?
It's very funny. If you like Lumberjanes, if you like Nimona, if you like Princess Ugg, Princeless, stuff like that. Like I feel like this is right in that same vein of just like really cool lady heroes. Being funny.
And it's just, my God.
And if you like the Superior Foes of Spider-Man and the new Ant-Man run by the same Nick Spencer, I think you dig this too. It's a lot of the same, like, kind of wacky off the wall.
Yeah, very kind of off the wall, off kilter stuff that you don't expect, but is amazing.
Yeah.
And if you end up reading this, go check out Secret Wars, Secret Love #1 because there is a Squirrel Girl mini where she wins a date with Thor.
Nice.
That is hilarious.
That's awesome. I haven't read that yet. I'm so excited.
Oh, it's so good.
So excited. I haven't read any of the secret romances yet, but I've been
there's
hearing
only one issue.
No, there's one with Miss Marvel and Robbie, and then there's another one.
No, they're all shorts.
Oh, okay.
It's one issue. There's like 3 or 4 shorts inside it.
Well, there's another issue coming out too.
Yes, and you should definitely check it out.
Cool.
Kayleigh, what do you got?
I have Friends with Boys by Faith Erin Hicks, and I picked this up at Kit's recommendation.
Off Toby's bookshelf.
Yep, just stole it right off his bookshelf.
Broke into Toby's house.
Kit was like, it'd be a great idea if you destroyed Toby's house and stole all of these books.
That sounds like Kit.
Yep.
Every week she would just pitches another one of Toby's stolen books. His police report
52 weeks of Toby's stolen books.
But it is about this girl who is homeschooled, and she goes to public high school for the first time, and it's kind of a thing that her whole family does. She has a bunch of older brothers, and they all homeschooled up to their first year of high school, and then they go to high school. And she's kind of learning how to make friends and be a friendly person and like find her way. And then this is further complicated by the fact that she is haunted by a like 19th century ghost. And it's really good. I really like this story because my brothers and I are really close. I have 2 older brothers and a younger one, and then a slightly stupid sister.
Slightly.
Just slightly. God, I hope she's listening.
I didn't even know you had a sister. That's how little you talk about her.
She lives in a tent.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
We've all been there before.
Yeah, we've all lived
We've
that
all
life.
lived on that farm eating dog food.
Those were two separate events, Kenny. And living on a farm in a tent was great.
But there's just a lot of scenes in there that if we pick, I'll elaborate on further. But it reminds me a lot of like my relationship with my brothers and kind of trying to figure out who you are. I was homeschooled as a kid and then went to public school sort of intermittently. And yeah, it's a great book.
Very cool.
I love it.
Great. Toby, what did you bring this week?
So I brought a book that I brought a good while ago, The Rabbi's Cat by Johann Safar. And this is a translation of a French comic. It's set in, I believe, 1930s Algeria. And it's about a cat that belongs to a rabbi and his daughter. And the cat eats their pet parrot and thereby gains the power of speech.
Yes.
And the book is about the cat's life, speaking with his owner, the rabbi, and their kind of dialogues about life and purpose and religion. And it's drawn in this like really cool, sort of sketchy, colorful style. And it's a really interesting book. It's one that I really like a lot. It has interesting things to say kind of about purpose and religion and what your place is in the universe. And it's a cool story that I really like. And I'd love to talk about it.
Very cool.
Chard, what do you got?
I am bringing a book by Paul Pope, who is a great comics artist writer. And I'm bringing Battling Boy.
Ooh.
Which, yeah, I don't know. Have we brought this before?
Mannix brought it.
Mannix has brought this
a
before.
million years ago.
Yeah, they talked about it on Out of the Fridge. I was not on that episode, but it is a great book. Basically, my favorite part about this book, which is maybe not the reason to have this as my favorite part, but so it's Haggard West is a character that lives in this universe of Battling Boy, and he's like been the hero for a really long time. And when he dies, they need to turn to this like he's like an immortal, like half god guy.
I have not read it.
You haven't read it. I'm looking at you. But one of the things they did as like a pre-build up to this comic was they put out issue like 145 or like a really high numbered issue of Haggard West, and people were like, oh yeah, there's this really long ongoing series called Haggard West. Yeah, it's been totally going on for a long time. Where are your back issues? And comic book stores are like, what fuck? There are no other issues of this. And they're like, yeah, this one says 145. Like, where are the other ones? And it just slays me how easy it is to kill comic book fans and just like get them to believe fucking anything. It's my favorite thing in the world. They were all convinced that this is like a character they had not heard of and that they were going to go dig up back issues. But anyway, so Haggard West dies and they need Battling Boy to like save the day, and this is an ongoing story, and it has some prequels that come after it and some now sequels. And
am I right in recalling that this is in some way partially inspired by Thor? Marvel's Thor?
Kind of. It feels like it's definitely in that kind of like tradition of carrying on a kind of a mythos.
Okay.
And like
I feel like it was like partially inspired by something, or like was originally designed as a certain kind of story and then they made it its own thing.
Yeah, I honestly do not.
I think what happened was right after New 52 started being a thing, Paul Pope went to DC and said, I have an idea to bring back Kamandi, the last boy.
That was it.
And Dan DiDio was like, we only care about this little tiny chunk of the pie, which are the people that really have, like, nobody wants to talk about that read comic books. And Paul Pope was like, well, fine, I'll go and do my own thing. And he did Battling Boy.
Okay. That's probably what I'm thinking of.
Yeah. So
because he's Paul Pope.
Yeah.
And he can do that.
Yeah. And it's a great book and everyone should check it out. And it's really fun. I'm just recommending the first volume, which is Battling Boy.
Awesome.
There have been subsequent things that have come out since then, but just the first one. Let's check it out. Kenny, what do you want to read?
I think I'll vote for Battling Boy.
It's pretty fun. I actually think you'd really dig it.
That's why I picked it.
Good.
Joe?
I think I'm going to vote for Gunnerkrigg Court because then I can read it with Audrey.
Nice.
Cool.
I am going to vote for the Unbeatable Squirrel Girl.
I'm going to vote for Friends with Boys.
I'm going to vote for Squirrel Girl. I was like, I don't even have to think about that one. That looks great. I love it.
Count it.
I talked about that a lot on Top of the Stack, but it is rad.
All right.
And welcome to all new Marvel now, all for you. Why Marvel
all new Marvel
now new go there.
Reboot secrets.
Yeah, it's gonna get out of control.
It's already
No. We're all done with the .nows and the point whatevers. It's now just all new, all different, everything.
Yeah.
All new.
That's the new term.
Secret Wars, all new, all different. Point now.
So before we go, I wanted to ask. Toby asked me a question the other day, and I thought it was really interesting.
Ooh.
And for all our listeners,
question
you want
of
to
the
post
week.
this
Question
on
of the day.
our
Tweeter.
Facebook page, or you can tweet at us.
Our Twitter. Or our Tumblr page.
If
they were making a comic book about you,
Yeah.
who would write and who would draw?
And I said that it would be it would most likely be Judd Winnick writing and Mike Waringo penciling, even though he's no longer with us.
Unfortunately.
But it's a dream casting.
It is a dream casting.
Yeah. And Mike Waringo, one of the greats.
Yeah.
Of all
And
time.
if Judd Winnick wasn't available, then Ryan North.
Okay.
Because I think
fair.
both of those. So
There you go. So we'll answer on our Facebook if you do.
yeah.
Yep.
There you go. Called you out, fans.
Yeah.
Get
Well,
to
we're
fucking work.
gonna post it anyways.
Well,
So
we're not
bring it.
going to
now?
post it anyway. That's not. No, we're not going to do it if they don't do it.
You can also give recommendations on who you think should write us.
Yeah, that's
That's true.
Okay. Yeah. Comment with who you think should write and draw the View from the Gutters
comic.
team book.
Yeah.
or individual.
And what our powers
Just
would
up
be.
to you.
Just write fucking anything.
Just
Just
fucking
write
talk to us,
anything.
please.
Don't
Go to our
Jesus
Facebook
Christ.
page and smash your hand against the keyboard as hard as you can.
Section ruined.
Right.
We
Ruin
are
animals.
so desperate for fan interaction.
No,
just
just
please
God.
talk to us.
I would write my book and George Perez would draw it.
Good.
Just so
okay.
you guys know.
No, that's good.
That's good.
That's good.
That's a little tease, though. Now you guys have to post on the Facebook page if you want to know Chards.
Yeah.
I would also write
know what
Mark
mine is.
Miller
I know what mine would
would
be.
write in.
It'd be cool. I'd smash stuff.
Well, you
And,
can tell me after we turn off the
Assad
mics, and if y'all make some posts, maybe we'll say
Yeah.
it on the Facebook page.
Yeah.
Patreon. Patreon.com.
Yeah, write it there too. Can they write stuff?
Don't
on
write it there. Just give
just
money.
go
Just
to
give
them.
money and we'll tell you.
We'll tell you.
You don't have to talk to us if you give us money.
A lot of people tweeted me, so thank you to everybody who's been sending me messages and stuff lately. But we'll talk to y'all later.
Yeah, bye, everybody.
Bye.
Love you. Good night.
Love you.
Thank you for listening to Me From the Gutters. I hope our recommendations have inspired you to go out and find some new comics you'll enjoy. Join us next time for a discussion of our selected title, but like every week, we encourage you to read all of the recommended books. In the meantime, please leave us an iTunes review. It really does help new listeners find the show. You can also like us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube, and follow us on Twitter at ViewFRTHGutters. Feel free to email us at contact@viewfromthegutters.com. Please send us any questions, comments, or recommendations you might have. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel as we post new videos every week. And thanks again for listening. And as always, keep reading.